Hi everyone. So today we're moving on with topic 4, and we're looking at food contamination and preserving food this week. So there are several ways that food can be contaminated. The first is bacteria. We can also contaminate food using toxins, heavy metals, pesticides, chemicals, or deliberate sabotage, or by insects, rodents, and excreta such as feces. So, microorganisms, there are two types of microorganisms that can contaminate food. There's the pathogenic and the non-pathogenic variety. So, the pathogenic variety is usually the one that results in food poisoning and potentially death if it's severe enough. And non-pathogenic is actually not harmful to your health, and it's actually used in food processing. So, yeast in bread making or beer manufacture is a type of non-pathogenic microorganism, as well as bacterial culture in yogurts and cheese as well. So, if microorganisms and bacteria are given the correct conditions, they can actually double in number every 20 minutes. So if they have sufficient numbers, this will actually cause food poisoning. Now, there is an activity in Moodle that I would like you to complete looking at bacterial growth. So can you make sure that you check on Moodle to have a look at that activity, which is on the Nutrition CD-ROM, which is at the top of the Moodle page. So the conditions required for bacteria to multiply include the availability of food, the correct temperature, which is what we call the danger zone, which is between 5 and 60 degrees, the time needed. So any longer than 4 hours, you have what's called can have a huge number of bacteria growth in food. You also need the presence of oxygen, water, and as well as a suitable pH for bacteria to grow in. So if we actually have a look at the number of microorganisms in a food, you have a lag phase, and then you have the perfect conditions to create an exponential growth, and then what we call a stationary phase. And then eventually what happens is some of these nutrients run out, and then you have a death phase. So in terms of destroying bacteria to make sure that you don't get food poisoning through microorganisms, you need to limit the food source, have it in the correct temperature, which is why refrigerators are set to 4 degrees Celsius because that is outside the danger zone. Uh, no more than 4 hours within this danger zone. So that's why foods in bain maries or food that's been sitting out in Asian in the food mart, you don't ever want to go and get food that's been sitting there since like 11 if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because the chances are that you might end up getting food poisoning if there's anything in there. If you use packaging that excludes oxygen, which is called modified atmosphere packaging, that will help to destroy bacteria, as well as dehydrating or adding salt or sugar to water, which makes it unsuitable for bacterial growth, and increasing the pH to make it, increasing the acidity of a solution of the food will also make it easier to destroy or prevent bacterial growth. So toxins are actually produced by bacteria and can survive even if the bacteria is dead. So they're not often destroyed if the food is reheated, can't be detected by taste, and it's just really making sure that you care for your food and prepare and store it safely to avoid contamination via toxins. So contamination of food can also occur through heavy metals, and this is the accumulation of food as or heavy metals in food as it progresses up the food chain. So this is called bioaccumulation. So you have, for example, mercury in the water that fish eats. Now that fish is eaten by another fish, and they eat a whole bunch of those small fish. And then that smaller fish is eaten by a bigger fish, and that increases the concentration. And then we eat the fish, and we get a huge increase in heavy metal consumption. So that's why you should only buy seafood from reputable sources, rather because of this bioaccumulation problem. So pesticides can also contaminate food. And it could include both herbicide or fungicides. And you should always wash fresh fruit and vegetables before serving it, whether it's going to be cooking it up, or serving it in a fresh salad. So sometimes chemicals can contaminate food. So it could be the incorrect mixing of chemicals, or it could be mixing up. Um, well, you should never store chemicals in food containers because it could be mixed up as like Gatorade may actually be coolant, for example, because coolant can actually be red, and you've got red Gatorade. So don't ever store chemicals in food containers. So you can contaminate food deliberately, and this could either be in the form of a powder or a substance, or you might want to poison someone. So it's also really important that you follow media warnings about contamination of food and either return or dispose of food that may be suspected of being contaminated. So there are two pieces or processes that are put in place to help make sure that if there is any contamination, that it's dealt with properly. And the first one is what we call food labelling. So for SANS, which is Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, is there for food safety. And then we've got the hazard analysis critical control points, which is the HACP, and that's used to track the critical stages in food processing, storage, and transport, and they test at these critical points to make sure that all the food is safe to consume at these points. So food can also be spoiled as well, and it's usually pretty easy to identify because it looks moldy or it has a funny smell or a flavour. And this is a natural process and occurs to all food if you leave it out. And basically, you've got microorganisms that are growing on the food and eating it and causing that mold, in this case, to grow. So factors that increase food spoilage include mishandling food. So if you've got bruising or broken surfaces, that will free up nutrients that will be taken advantage of by the different molds. If you don't store your food correctly or expose it to oxygen, that will also increase the risk of it spoiling, and exposure to light as well. So moving on to food additives or preservatives and how we can actually process foods to make them last longer on the shelves or to taste better. So they are a important component of our food supply, and we enjoy a variety of foods because of food additives. And the main reason is to ensure that our food lasts longer and it's easier to use. So there are many reasons for using food additives. They could be used to improve the stability or quality of a food. So sorbitol is used for dried fruit to maintain moisture level and the softness of the fruit. It could be to preserve food, to extend the storage life. So sulfur dioxide is often used, added to meat products such as sausage meat to prevent bugs from causing food poisoning. Another reason is to improve the taste or appearance of a processed food. So lecithin, which is an emulsifier, will actually help margarine to maintain its texture rather than separate. I'm not going to go through this table, but you can have a look at this. There's all the additives and the function that they have. So they're usually only included in small quantities and are used just to help make a food better, whether it be in preservation or whether it be in its appearance. So some substances are actually naturally occurring. So vitamin C and is an example of an additive that is naturally occurring, and lecithin that I talked about before is actually naturally occurring as well, and it's found in eggs and soybeans and is added as a food additive. So not all preservatives or additives are artificial. So there are a bunch of food additives. So there are preservatives, antioxidants, sweeteners, flavorings, and color enhancers, and emulsifiers or stabilizers. So preservatives are obviously there to preserve the shelf life of food. So preservatives can be found in deli meat, which will be cured, so it's usually salt. They can be added to baked goods, soft drinks, or fruit juices, or some other ones, for example, are vinegar or sulfur dioxide. So there are a whole bunch of benefits to the consumer. The food is safer for longer, it lengthens the shelf life, it enables transport in bulk, which cuts down cost, protects from contamination of microorganisms, prevents wastes, and is able to be added to some fruits to prevent browning or decolorization, which is what was moving into antioxidants. So they help prolong the shelf life by stopping fatty acid from going rancid. So meat, for example, ascorbic acid is a natural antioxidant that is found in fruit and will prevent fruit from going brown. So when you see that brown tinge that you get on an apple, that's actually the oxidation process, and using vitamin C will help to prevent that from happening. So again, it's about prolonging the shelf life, extending the shelf life of foods as well, and preventing or anesthetic appealing food colors as well, so browning of fruits, for example. So sweeteners are used to increase the taste of food, whether it be an intense sweetener or a bulk sweetener. So intense sweeteners usually are very, very sweet, and therefore you only need a tiny little bit of them to make something sweeter. So aspartame and saccharin are examples. Aspartame is the one that you use in Coke Zero or Pepsi Max, and saccharin can be found in some of these ones here. So bulk sweeteners are like glucose syrup or table sugar, and you need a large quantity. And some of these, particularly these bulk sweeteners, can cause health problems like diabetes or obesity, for example. There are a bunch of benefits to the consumers. It does enhance the sweetness of food. You can give the intense sweeteners to reduce the sugar content because you only need a little bit. Can be used for low calorie diets to lose weight. The intense sweeteners can be added to foods because it's safer for teeth compared to bulk sweeteners, and they can also be added to foods to allow diabetics to eat those foods. So the another additive is flavoring or flavor enhancers, and this is usually because the flavor is lost during processing and it needs to be restored through an additive. So they can also simply add flavor to food as well. So vanilla ice cream, for example, add vanilla bean to ice cream to just create a flavor. So MSG is a flavor enhancer that's used in Chinese meals and is a way of enhancing flavor, but some people don't like the aftertaste, so don't tend to use it, or it can actually be allergic, so people have been starting to use herb spices and other seasonings rather than MSG. So some of the benefits is that they make the flavor stronger or improve the taste, can also give an odor as well that is appealing, and you can actually use artificial flavors that will reduce the cost, and you can actually add flavors to food where you can't replicate the natural flavor. So colorings are used to enhance the color of food. So caramel, for example, is a really popular coloring and is used in Coke, and some colorings will be added to food to make them more appealing. So when you actually process peas, they turn brown, and green coloring is actually added back to the peas to turn them green again. So baby foods are only allowed to have colors that are sources of vitamins and therefore are natural, but there are still a bit of controversy around adding additives to baby food. So quite a few people will now actually make their own baby food so they know what's going into it. So some of the benefits of colouring including restoring the colour due to processing and appear the appearance, and they'll also make them appear more attractive as well. So emulsifiers and stabilizers are the last type of additive that we're going to look at, and they help to mix ingredients. So if you've ever bought a jar of natural peanut butter, when you open it up, you'll notice that the oil is sitting on the top and then the peanuts are sitting on the bottom. And that's because that peanut butter doesn't have any emulsifiers or stabilizers in it to allow mixing. Whereas Kraft peanut butter, for example, does have emulsifiers in it. So the reason or the purpose of emulsifiers is to allow fats and oils to mix with water, and therefore you can actually make a low-fat spread or salad dressing. So emulsifiers will give a smooth and creamy texture, again will improve the shelf life, and can be naturally occurring as well. They can also help with the viscosity of the product, so whether something is really runny or quite thick, and it can also produce healthy products as well. So some other types of additives just briefly include raising agents like sodium bicarbonate that you would use in baking to make a baked product lighter in texture. Thickening agents like corn flour are used to form a gel to thicken sauces, and some nutrients might actually be added to food, and that's what we call fortified uh, foods like cereals, for example, where they actually add vitamins and minerals to enrich the nutrient content of food. So FSANZ ensures safe food by developing food standards, and all additives must be listed on the ingredient list of the food label and must be listed under their name as well as the code in brackets. So if you actually have a look at the ingredient list on some food in your house, you'll see a whole bunch of numbers next to various additives.